Hey, this is MJ, and in today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to make this beautiful ribbed style hat. I had made this hat for my little granddaughter when she was born, and I've had so many requests for it. I'm finally getting to the tutorial as the weather is getting a little cooler and you're going to be needing some hats this fall. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using Upcycle Alpaca Blend worsted weight yarn. This yarn is from We Crochet, and it is a blend of alpaca, wool, and acrylic. The original hat I made in Heather Lee sport weight yarn. So my baby size will come out a little bit smaller if you work it up in the sport weight, and then you'll get a nice newborn size hat. This worsted weight is on the thinner side as well, so I would say that it is closer to maybe a DK weight rather than a worsted, and you can get some variance from ball to ball. Some colors tend to be a little bit thicker than others, but ultimately when you're making a hat, if it comes out a little bit on the bigger side, it's not a big deal. I'll be using two hook sizes for the pattern, a 5.5 millimeter and a 4.5 millimeter. So the larger hook I'm using for the ribbing because it will tend to really pull the size of the hat in, and then I'll use the smaller hook to make the band that goes around the bottom. So the construction of this hat is worked from the side across. So we're going to make a large rectangle, then we'll seam it together. We'll then add on our band and close up the top of the hat. I'll have links for the yarn and the hooks that I use, plus the supply. So I've used some pom-poms from Amazon, and they are a snap style. So you'll attach the snap to the top of the hat and then just snap the pom-pom to it so you can remove it for washing. The tags that I use are from brickbubble.ca, and she does these custom tags so you could get names done. There's lots of different things you can get with her. So she just has some generic tags as well. There's some really cute ones, Little Explorer, Precious Cargo, Go Little Rock Star. So you can get creative. And then I have my personalized logo tags, and then I had a bunch made up for my granddaughter with her name. Okay, so we're going to begin with our 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. Put a slip knot on your hook and begin with a chain of 27. Now we'll be working half double crochets, and you'll be working in the second chain from the hook. I'm going to turn my work to the side so that I can see the little bumps right here. I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to go through that back bump of the chain, pulling up a loop, yarn over, pulling through all three. Yarn over, find that next little loop that's on the back we like to refer to it as the back bump of the chain. Pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all three. If your chain is too tight, you may find it hard to work into, so you may need to loosen up your chain if you're struggling. But what this does is it does give us a cleaner edge on this side that you can see as a stitch, whereas if you work into the back loop of the chain, you're just going to have the one loop there to work into when we seam this. So I just find this looks a little bit nicer, and once you get the hang of it, it's really easy to do. You just need to make sure the chain isn't too tight. Not too loose either. You don't want it looking off that edge when you work into it, but you can see mine is not too loose, but it's also not too tight when I'm working into those back bumps. So I'm going to finish working across, and I should have 26 stitches once I've worked all the way. Okay, so I've worked all the way across. I have 26 stitches. Now I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. Now I want you to look at your stitch. So here's your front loop and your back loop. We're just going to go right through the stitch and make a slip stitch. So go through the stitch, you're going to grab a loop, pulling it through the loop on your hook. And try not to do this too tight either. May take some practice, but you don't want the slip stitch to distort your work in any way. So keep it nice and loose as you work across. So I usually pull it up, make sure it's not too tight, and then pull it through. Okay, and I'm going to work that slip stitch all the way across. Okay, so I'm working away, and I really want to explain to you how this stitch is working. So when I go through and I make a slip stitch, this right here is the stitch of the half double crochet, and it's being pushed to this side. If you look on this side, this is the actual slip stitch that you can see. So we can see a full stitch over here. Okay, and we can see a full stitch on this side. So keep that in mind as we go. So we go and we do this slip stitch, and the stitch that we've gone under, it's pushing to that side. Our slip stitch is on this side, which is the wrong side. Now this stitch, it's really easy to lose count or lose a stitch, so make sure to count as you go. And keep those slip stitches nice and loose, or it's going to be hard to work into them. So I'm going to chain 1 and turn. So now let's look at it. We have the stitch of our half double crochet pushed to this side. It's really important that we keep this forward so we're not working into any of these loops. As I shown you before, this back here was the slip stitch we made. So what we're doing is we're actually working into the back loop of the slip stitch. Okay, so it can seem confusing. This is really thick because this is pushed forward. This is the half double crochet, the front of that stitch. This back here is the slip stitch that we just made. So we're going to yarn over. We're going to do a half double crochet through the back loop only of the slip stitch. Now this slip stitch, if you've made it too tight, it's going to be really hard to work into, so make sure it's loose. Should be easy to work into. I'm going to do a few here. I'm going to show you what this is doing to the right side here of our work. So you can see this is really now popping up that half double crochet stitch. This is that top stitch of the half double crochet. So it's nice and thick. It gives it a nice pop. So you just have to remember, if you look at that slip stitch back here, you want to work through the back loop of it. I think this stitch will be really easy to confuse and get messed up. And this video tutorial, I think, is really important to watch and understand how I'm making this stitch so that you can get it right. And it does really give a beautiful ribbed look that I just love. Okay, so I'm going to work all the way down that row. Worked all the way down. Now I'll chain 1 and turn, and we're going to do the slip stitch again. And now I want you to look at this half double crochet stitch as well, because this also can get confusing. Our half double crochet stitch has 3 loops. So if you turn your work like this, you want to turn it. This is your front loop, this is your back loop. If you turn it this way, there's another loop here. And when you're looking at me on this video, you may think this is the actual stitch and this is the front loop, but it's not. It's the third loop of the half double crochet. So it's a loop that sits really under the stitch, but it does tend to pop forward to this side. But we're going under the actual stitch when we make our slip stitch. So we're going under the stitch and working a slip stitch. So I always turn my work to make sure I don't get confused. And again, as you watch yourself working that slip stitch, this is the slip stitch right here, and you don't want it too tight or it will make your next row really painful to work into. So keep your tension nice and loose. If you are a really tight crocheter, you may want to go up a hook size. Okay, so you're going to want to work all the way. So I've worked all the way. I'm going to chain one and turn, and I'm going to show you this just one more time. So we can see here the half double crochet stitch has been pushed to the right side. Here is my slip stitch that I've worked. And some yarns you're going to see the stitch even more defined. So the Heatherly yarn, you can really see the stitch definition well. And if you really love the colors and love the look of this, you can try it out. This, to get the newborn size, I use Sport, but you could use the Sport weight and test it out. Some of the balls of the upcycle are pretty thin, but you could also go to the worsted weight and use that if you want to make sure that the hat's a little bit warmer and thicker. But I really loved these colors that I'm working with for fall. Some really beautiful color options. With the upcycle alpaca, here's another orange color, the really nice deep garnet color, really pretty colors for fall. So that's why I went with this particular yarn. So I have found my slip stitch. I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to work my half double crochet through the back loop. So now if you're playing around with different yarns or even different weights, I do have measurements included in the pattern for the different hat sizes. So I have the measurement of the rectangle you need. This gives you some flexibility that you could change out your yarn, and if your yarn is working up, let's say, a bit heavier, you could alter your stitch count and your rows just to get it to equal the size the rectangle should be for the size you're working on. And even if you find the differences between the colors for this yarn, that gives you an idea if maybe, or your gauge is off, that you need to maybe do some more stitches, a few less stitches, less rows, more rows, just to get your rectangle the right size. I'm just going to continue with this off camera. I'm going to meet you back up when I have my total rows of 57 rows for this size. And just a little tip, it's easy to count based on twos. So this was our first row, so 2, 4, and this would be row 5, and then there would be another bump up for the next row, but we're ending on an odd number so that it's flat like this. So here is what it looks like when I have 57 rows done. Now it is normal for it to want to curve. You could block this before you put your hat together. If it's curving really badly, You could also just try to see if you could straighten it out a bit with your hands, which this actually does work a little bit, but you could block it to measurements if you really want to fix this curve before you join it all up. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to continue to show you how this works. We can count again the rows by 2, 2, 4, 6, 8. This is 56, and we're ending on that half double crochet row, which is row 57. The rectangle is measuring 13.5 inches by 6 inches approximately. So again, you want to get your rectangle about this size. Now it's important to note how much this is going to stretch. Okay, this is going to stretch significantly. So if you're thinking, how is that going to fit my baby? It's going to be way too small. Their head's much bigger than that. You're going to notice you get a lot of stretch with this hat. Now to seam the hat together, we're going to fold it so that the wrong side's facing. And as you can see, it's not even. It's sort of off. Even when you go to fold it in half, you can tell that my rectangle is not straight. I'm going to chain 1. And I'm going to position this so that I can work right across. So now what I want to do is go through this stitch. I'm going to slip stitch it to join it. So I'm going to go through the first stitch, and I'm going to come over and go through the stitch on the other side, completing a slip stitch. So I'm going to work that, and this is where that back hump really helps because it gives us a really defined stitch to work through. So I'm going through this one, going right under the 2 loops of this one, and working a slip stitch. I'm going to do that all the way. Okay, working through each stitch, we're going to slip stitch that up together. Once you've done that, it's going to look like this, which does blend in really well. And then we're going to chain 1, and what we want to do is we're going to work single crochets around, and 1 per row. So 1 per our half double crochet row, 1 per the slip stitch row. So we end up with 57, but I'll probably get an extra in there for the slip stitch seam, so a total of 58. And I'm still going to be working this with the larger hook. I don't want it to go too tight. Like if we drop to the smaller hook at this point, it may be too tight around the head because, again, we know that this is going to stretch a lot. It's really easy to pick out the rows because one of them is going to be sunken in and then the other popped out. So I'm going to finish working that all the way around. Okay, so I've worked all the way around. I'm at 57, and I'm just going to go in here and make it 58 for a nice even number. And then I'm going to change over to my smaller hook. Going to slip stitch to join. Okay, so now I'm going to chain out a total of 17. And I'm going to work single crochets in the back loop only. So in the second chain from the hook, we're going to work a single crochet. So it will be the back loop of the chain. And then for each row after this, single crochet back loop only. So I'm going to work that all the way down. I'm going to have 16 stitches. So we're going to skip the very first stitch, which you can see it's attached sort of to our slip stitch. We slip stitched into the first one, and so you can see it's somewhat attached. I know this part can be tricky for people. So for every row that we make, we should have a stitch down here. So we've already made one row. So that is accounted for this stitch. We're now going to slip stitch into the next two. So you're not going to see anything attached to that. No slip stitches. So 1, 2. So we've now slip stitched into 2 stitches. We're going to crochet 2 more rows. Going to turn. We're going to single crochet through the back loop only. We're going to skip the 2 slip stitches. Going to find the stitch. You can see here's the back loop only. So we'll work single crochets now through the back loop only. And it is important to count here as well, just to make sure that you're not missing a stitch. So you should have 16. So once you're to the end, we're going to chain 1 and turn. And this will be our second row now that we're working, and we're single crocheting back down through the back loop. And again, just count your stitches as you go so you can stay on track with that ribbed band. Now, once you work all the way down, you're going to see right here, we've slip stitched into this stitch. Now we've worked a row for every stitch that has a slip stitch. So 1, 2, 3, we're going to now slip stitch into the next 2. And then we'll work 2 more rows. We're just going to repeat this all the way around. Now, because we started with just that first row, we're going to end up ending with just 1 row because we have an even number. So I'll work all the way around and then I'll meet you back up just to show you that last bit. This is just repetitive now. We're just working rows back and forth and we're slip stitching to the base of the hat. Okay, so once you've worked all the way around, I had slip stitched in that final stitch. I've worked my way back up. So you should be ending up here at the top. I'm going to chain 1, and now we're going to slip stitch our band together. So I'm going through, whoops, I have my wrong size hook here. So we're going to work through the back loop only, working across, and we'll slip stitch to join. So the back loop, going across to the next stitch on the other side. So that's that starting chain. So you'll find there's just that one loop there to work into. Okay, so work your slip stitches all the way down. Okay, so then what we're going to do is fasten that off. And we can weave in that tail. Now, if you look at it, you're going to think this looks like it's fairly snug compared to the rest of the hat. But again, you're going to get a lot of stretch. And with bands that go around your hat, they will stretch out over time. So using that smaller hook, making sure it is a little snugger, it's going to ensure your band doesn't stretch out too much and really affect the overall shape and look of your hat. Now, as you can see, as me just stretching it a little bit, it's already coming out to almost the size of the hat. So I'm going to weave in this tail, and then I'll meet you up for the next part. And always remember when you're weaving that tail is that we're going to go one way back in the opposite direction, and you're just going to want to hide them through the stitch, making sure not to go through the other side. And always when you come back, don't go back from exactly where you came. You want to go through a different section so it doesn't pull it out. So now with my smaller hook, I'm going to make a slip knot, get that on the hook, and then we're going to join up here right to our seam. Now, what I'm going to do is crochet around to help start pulling the hat, the top of the hat together. I'm going to work single crochet in the seamed area, and then I'm going to go, and I like to just go right in between kind of this stitch. Okay, I'm going to skip over this row, go right again in between there, that popped up row. I'm going to keep doing that all the way around. So I'm just skipping every other row, single crocheting. And that will start to pull this hat in for us. So once you get all the way around, we're going to slip stitch into our first single crochet to join. And then we're going to fasten off with a long tail for closing up the hat. Okay, so now we're going to take the yarn needle and we're going to do some weaving to pull the top of the hat closed. So you're going to weave through the first stitch. We're skipping that next stitch, going into the next. Skipping the next stitch, going into the next. And we're going to repeat that all the way around. So once you get all the way around, you're now just going to pull. It's going to pull your hat closed. And then we're just going to do some additional weaving just to make sure this is all secure. You can also grab any little bits that are popped up. So if this is popping up here, you can always just grab that with your needle to pull it in. And as we keep weaving this around, it is going to pull in the top of the hat nicely. Then you can go back in the opposite direction. And then that is going to secure it. Okay, so now I'm going to sew on the pom-pom snap. So you're just going to take the snap, put it to the top of the hat. Unless you plan on not doing a pom-pom, then you can omit this step. And I have a really thin yarn needle and I have some of the yarn that matches the hat. You're just going to work around. Okay, once I get it all the way around, I'm just going to take my tails now and I'll knot this. You can weave these tails to the inside if you want. I'm just going to trim them for the speed of the tutorial. And then what you want to do is to take your blow dryer, give your pom-pom a nice blow dry. It's going to really fluff it up nicely. They usually come out of the packaging pretty squished. I even find sometimes once you get it on the hat, it's a little bit easier to blow dry. And I like to find that seam, keeping it to the back of the hat. And then we can attach one of the tags. So if you want a tag like this, you can use the leather rivets to just attach the tag here, or these tags you will need to sew in place.